This is Functional and Fabulous, the omni-channel podcast, where we unbox tales of online retail and digital transformation.
In this episode, Jer quotes from the classics.
Hiya! Wax on, wax off.
Our guest is too impressive.
He's a recognised speaker offering services in strategic planning, marketing, actually too many services to name.
Gordon explains technology.
They do their flashy thing.
And the episode is boarded by pirates.
The guy in the back of the ship with the parrot on his shoulder.
This episode of Functional and Fabulous is brought to you with pride by Studio 49, retail e-commerce experts, omni-channel growth consultants, and cut-through performance marketing specialists. Studio 49, where your digital retail success is built.
So, it's always the same. Bloop. So you're very welcome to another episode of Functional and Fabulous, and we're joined here today with our guest Rich Chapple. Rich, it's great to see you.
Good morning, guys. How are you both?
Hi, Rich. Beyond excited to have you on the podcast this morning.
Yeah, thank you. Me too. I can't wait to get into it.
So just a little bit about Rich's background. Rich is a seasoned growth and strategy expert known for growing 3 unicorn companies, Gymshark, the Hook Group, Ingenuity and Play.com to serious scale and profitably. He is co-founder and chief growth officer of the Growth Foundation, an organization that provides high potential businesses with the right tools to grow across all their foundations, from e-commerce to talent. He's a recognized speaker offering services in strategic planning, marketing, actually too many services to name. So I'm just going to go straight to his
doing a great job here. Yeah, I keep going. It's great.
Superpower, clarity of proposition, and that's something that we're really looking to get into today as one of his superpowers. Rich, it's absolutely fantastic to have you here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, looking forward to it.
So I suppose just to kind of kick off, Chief Growth Officer at the Growth Foundation, you must be the growing person.
That's a lot of growing, Rich.
Absolutely. So let me deconstruct that, because maybe some of your listeners have found as well, you sort of start to see the word growth coming up in sort of individual or sort of role titles. I've seen, actually, we've hired a couple of chief growth officers and growth managers, but ultimately the way that my purpose and responsibility at Growth Foundation sort of sits across 2 functions. Actually, it's product. So the way we talk about products is, the purpose of a product team is to source or create amazing wow products that your target audience and customers love and talk about, and so I've got a responsibility for that here in terms of, for our client base, making sure that we create those products and services. And then the second function I look after here is actually brand. So it's the brand purpose is really ultimately overtly artistic and emotional. It's storytelling, it's that thought leadership, it's getting people to fall in love with you. And when I say people, our target audience. So they're the 2 functions I look after here. And actually that's because I suppose we're called the Growth Foundation. It's all about the product and the brand that we work with in our clients. If I think about the chief growth officers or growth roles that we hire into perhaps e-commerce businesses, it's usually slightly lower funnel than that. It's much more around the performance marketing and traffic and trading and conversion rate optimization of the stores typically. And
I think it's great that not alone are you working on the growth for your clients, but you also have to imbibe your own medicine and basically make your own brand grow.
Yeah, we talk about quite frequently, we need to Growth Foundation ourselves here at this moment, because we go through all the same growing pains and joys of our clients as well, right? And it's a bit like the analogy, I don't know if you guys have got mates who are in the building trade. Quite often they're brilliant at building houses for their clients, and actually when you go around to their place, there's still a radiator hanging off the wall and the decorating needs doing, because you don't spend enough time on your own thing. So we obviously proactively and quite consciously make sure we're sort of running our own business through our framework and
the real cobbler's shoes problem.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
We only relaunched our website last week as a web design, web development agency. We had the world's most overcomplicated, incredibly hard to use, bleeding edge website previously, and it took us an awful lot to kind of come back around and say, right, look, what would we have done for clients? We'd have totally simplified this. We'd have built it in something like Shopify. So that's what we're going to do.
You're taking your own medicine, absolutely.
Exactly. So, what, chief growth officer, what does that mean for you? Like when you're looking, you mentioned there that you hired a couple of chief growth officers. What are you looking for? What kind of person?
Well, I suppose there's two things to deconstruct there. Chief usually means, or I suppose director, is that you have I suppose, permission or expected by, let's say, the board to be responsible for direction and strategy, and the way that when I talk about that, that's the decisions. Probably we'll dive into this a little bit more around that clarity and purpose of where to play and how to win of the brand. So we sort of deconstruct strategy into sort of, again, a rational and emotional sides of that one thing. So on the rational side, where to play, which is which products you do and don't source and make, which target audiences you do and do not try and attract, which sales channels you sell through. Are you 100% D2C? Are you, multi-channel? You might have some Amazon and marketplace, or have you got wholesaling as well? And then geography, are you an Ireland-only brand, or are you trying to perhaps, build in Ireland and then scale out into the UK and to the US and Europe? So you'd expect your chief, probably in any role in the business, if they're in a commercial one, operational finance, to have some experience in terms of, I suppose, informing the decision that the board would make around those things that you do and don't do. So that's the chief part. And then I suppose growth ultimately directly links to demand creation, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And that's probably a combination of having some influence over actually the where to play elements, which is, what products, how good are they? What's the offer architecture and the value proposition? How do we turn up? And this comes back to the second side of the strategy, like the how to win. That's the emotional side. It's all the things you say and how you say them, when you don't. It's all those elements. And obviously then it probably covers then the marketing, amplifying your message, and your product and brand through paid media, CRM, the trading, the point of sale itself, so the website. So there's an element of those things effectively. And actually, when I say in terms of leadership here within Growth Foundation, I have very much a kind of clarity around product and brand. But when I'm talking to a founder of, let's say, a 10 million euro scale up business, they expect me to influence and give a sense of all of those demand sort of functions in the business. And you probably have, I suppose, slightly less permission to be getting really stuck into perhaps then the operational or the foundations, right, which are finance, technology, sort of insight, those kind of things, right? It's very demand led.
And can you tell us, Rich, that you mentioned 10 million euro sort of size businesses.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of sweet spot for the businesses that you work with and the businesses that you help? When is the right time to come and talk to the Growth Foundation?
That, I suppose, that point, and it depends on average order value, right? Because obviously if you're selling, let's say beds or mattresses or very high AOV type of products, it may be that you're already up there. Actually, it's probably around, we look a little bit more at sort of team size and actually and I suppose how the founder is thinking. So usually the perfect time to speak to us will be when a founder's perhaps been, and typically we find that they're now sort of product visionaries. They've found, they've found the need for a product that they couldn't find in the market. They decide to speculate, take some risk, and they're still working in a bedroom. Perhaps, family and friends are helping them get going. And then there's a moment, an inflection point when they think, right, I can see this has got an opportunity greater than a lifestyle business. This could be a brand that has some legacy, or actually could have some material value for me in the future. Maybe I want to sell it to, a competitor, or I could, or float it in the future. Who knows what comes down the line? But they realize there's sort of more potential in the product or the service that they've created. And it's usually at that point when they think they're aware that there are known unknowns. I know these things need to happen, but I don't know how to do them. Or, and obviously they won't know the unknown unknowns. But obviously a good trigger would be that there's things that I know I need to do. I've got no idea how to approach them. And I've, I'm paralyzed by choice. I'm paralyzed by not having pattern recognition. And also probably there's an element where they start to think about professionalizing the organization. So I'm going to make my first 2, 3, 4 hires, probably in areas that I don't enjoy doing. So it might be that, again, they're a product visionary. I love working on product. Actually, I hate doing the finance. I don't enjoy doing the performance marketing, etc. Right. And then I'm going to start to hire. So that's probably a great time to talk to us. I suppose if you're slightly larger, and maybe, again, we sort of have, that might be first inflection point, getting out of the bedroom into that first sort of, let's say, maturing the business with a bit more sophistication. There's usually another inflection point once it's the couple of years after you've done that first move. And then it's like, great, this is working, but I maybe made some wrong calls on the hires I made. I'm actually paralyzed by the choice I have in strategy. I want to go into different countries, but I don't know where to go. But I think I've got the team now in place to be able to start executing some of that stuff. So that's a really good time as well for us to sort of interact.
And if we were to, sorry, Gordon, if we were to talk about one of the businesses that you're well known for working with, Gymshark, was that the kind of situation they were in? That paralysis of choice and trying to figure out what they do next and how to grow their business. Was that the same? Was that what they were experiencing?
Yeah, to some degree, yes. And one of the things we've got at Growth Foundation is we look through sort of two very different binoculars or lenses when we sort of get to meet a business. And that's one around, I suppose, assessing the clarity of strategy. So how, I suppose, confident and rigorous are the decisions that the founders or the senior leadership team have made on those where to plays and how to wins. And at Gymshark at that time, I think probably there was ambition to do a lot. So it was that sort of not quite paralysis of choice, but almost like trying to do all of them at once and kind of thinking, right, which ones perhaps do we need to focus on first?
What kind of things were they looking at? Had they gone beyond
it would have been things like, I suppose, could there be other, and obviously the brand is famous for like functional training and weightlifting, for example. So could we go into CrossFit or running or swimming or other kind of gym-led categories, or even potentially when you think about product, is it footwear? Is it sports nutrition? Is it meal prep? Is it all the other things, that would potentially take share of an active gym goer's wallet? How could you take a greater share of that? There was some paralysis around, I suppose, geography. The business was brilliantly launched with Ben and Lewis thinking about, this is a global opportunity, and Shopify can effectively reach all parts of the world when they launched. And it was kind of to say, they were proactively hunting sort of customers in the UK and the US, but actually rest of the world was passive. But when you think operationally, okay, it's great that we can say we've shipped to over 150 countries. When you sort of look from the bottom up in the P&L operationally, that package to that far east location that we sent 3 or 4 times, maybe 2 of them have returned because our sizing doesn't quite work for consumers in that part of the world. Has been sent back. We've spent $400 shipping that to and from that place. So there's those kind of decisions around, do you know what? Maybe we should say we'll proactively hunt these 2 countries. These will be passive and will be open because they're actually profitable when we do sell to customers in those places. And then the long tail of the rest of the 180 countries in the planet will just effectively switch off.
So there's two kind of things going on there, isn't there? There's clarity around the proposition of the what are we selling? Are we pushing into adjacent categories? And then the where are we going to sell that? And
and it's where, and then target audience is the other one. And this is where they had actually really loads of rigor and clarity. It would be to young, already in the gym people. So when I met Ben, and this hopefully make your listeners giggle a little bit, I remember, in my late 30s when I meet him, I'm slightly more timber around my waist when I met them for the first time, and actually meeting them inspired me to get into better shape, actually. I said, guys, would you be happy for me to wear Gymshark products? And they're like, absolutely not. You're too old and you're too fat.
That's quite blunt.
But the clarity of, I suppose, let me deconstruct that because might sound a bit arrogant in some way, but actually I suppose the age thing is really interesting in terms of they had the clarity of servicing consumers that were like them. So in their early 20s, who were already, in the gym already. And I think the other point around that kind of you're too fat, because I'm conscious that could sound, well, actually, look, that's not very inclusive. And, we've all got different things going on in terms of managing our weight and things like that. But actually, when you deconstruct that, it was, you haven't earned the right to wear the brand in our view. The people who wear our brand, this is in the early days, very much in the early adopter days of the brand, where they were the individuals that actually took a proactive choice to go to the gym probably 5 days a week, and they would train for a couple of hours every time they went. It was seen as hopefully still is today, a badge of honor, by wearing that, that icon.
It's credible product for credible regular gym users.
So that's a really interesting thing to try and protect as you do grow, and you want to sort of again, reach more consumers who perhaps aren't as active when they're training, but that clarity that they had there was absolutely key and clear.
So that when they talk customer decision there, Rich, that's almost as important as, or probably as important as the adjacency discussion. So you're kind of, do we push into different categories, or do we push into different age groups or different activity levels?
Yeah. And even within age, if you think about that, the way, and I suppose actually there's some great, I suppose one of the things actually, I'll quote something I heard from Stephen Bartlett on Dragon's Den. I'm not sure if you guys get the UK BBC Dragon's Den where you are.
We know Stephen Bartlett, but
yeah, and he said something that I suppose I've encountered and encouraged as well, which is like, in a very crowded market, if you want to disrupt, that strategy and those decisions you make on the where to play should be needle thin.
Yeah,
that will allow you then perhaps to really service a very narrow set of consumers. Because actually think about 16 to 24-year-olds, you've already taken a lot of the addressable market away as the population. We've now said who are in the gym, we've gone down again. Who are actually only in the weights area of the gym, we've gone down again. And actually there's another divide that we kind of identified, which was the customers that we were really keen to sort of, I suppose, engage and build communities around, were the ones that actually were the extroverts in the gym. They were the ones that would look training in front of the mirror. They would it was a social space to build relationships with other gym goers. And then there's another group who are in the weights area of the gym who are, hoods up, headphones on, or on their own. This is a very personal space. It's an introverted sort of experience. So we've gone down from millions to, hundreds of thousands down to maybe 100,000, 10,000. It was that kind of factoring down and then building a product that absolutely delighted them. And not only products, content, creative, storytelling, all that good stuff for quite a needle thin target audience. And
would you have an example of, let's say, a decision they made that under other circumstances might seem a little bit mad, but in hindsight, okay, this was exactly the right thing?
There's quite a few, but I'm conscious of privileged information and things like that. So let me give you one that would come to life, but we'll see with what we know. So if you think about let me give you sort of sense of some of the clarity around the playbook. So that other kind of sort of fourth limb of that where to play was not discussed yet, actually, which was channel. The business made a proactive and conscious choice to be 100% direct to consumer online only. And what could feel unusual is that as we were building a bit of leverage and gaining some traction and attention, we would be approached by very famous sort of fashion retail businesses, and they would be very direct in terms of, here's a very large 7-8 figure purchase order if we can have your brand in our store.
Yeah, there would be a lot of temptation to just push into wholesale because of the reach that certain,
and let me sort of
sports
that a little bit more as well, because
you.
So before the clarity of that decision, the business was losing some, let's say, return on energy was low on that subject, because you kept negotiating it. Should we, shouldn't we, should we do it? What are the pros and cons? And we made that clarity of no, while we can create profitable demand, direct to consumer models are phenomenal. They're cash sort of generative and positive usually. You get your cash settled within a few days. You're paying your suppliers on maybe 30, 60, 90 days. You own your customer and the relationship with them directly and the insight it gives you, all those things. Whereas as soon as you start to get, let's say, hooked on the wholesale drugs, which for some brands is the right channel for them, you lose a lot of that visibility, insight. You become a negative cash model, all that other good stuff, right? So, but actually, one of the things that I suppose that we had that clarity around was, once we knew that, when those sort of invitations would come over by an email, it was a 30-second thanks very much, we're delighted to be asked, but no thank you. And then that energy can be used then on that sort of tactically executing where we should be. It
must have been so difficult for a founder to kind of write those emails. Thank you very much, we're delighted to be asked by such a large retailer, but we're going to say no, because what that means. You're turning away quite a substantial potential.
Yeah, and it's an interesting psychology there, isn't it? It's a bit of the cat and mouse there, because actually they just want you even more. Yeah. So they would come back a month later and say, have you changed your mind? And you'd be just building your leverage. And actually, I suppose for that business, while we would continue to grow the right way effectively, we just felt like we were building more power and leverage in that opportunity when we needed it. So it's a great example when we needed to pull it.
It's a great example though, because you can feel the temptation. Out of curiosity, so Gymshark now have opened up a store in Regent Street. What was what did you have any thoughts about that?
I've actually been there, visited it just as it was before it opened and just after. I mean, it's a phenomenal place. If you get the chance to go, absolutely get down there. Some of the innovation in physical retail is phenomenal. They've got kind of, racking that can move in and out of the ceiling to do to turn the space into a retail environment back to a gym studio, etc. They've worked very closely with Shopify, I think, to work on incredible point of sale. So again, it's not queuing at a till station. You've got that kind of more Apple experience to go and buy with people on the move on the shop floor, etc.
It still stays very true to that target customer.
Yeah.
That
originated.
Like
yeah. I suppose if I had, a similar budget and it was my choice to make only, I think it would have been interesting to look at perhaps actually going perhaps more gym first versus retail first, and sort of creating, epic kind of
the Gymshark gym experience,
kind of Mecca style. Apologies for using that word. Sort of places that you go on a pilgrimage to go and train in, and then kind of retail perhaps like a slightly more like a sort of like a Gold's Gym Disney experience, right? Which is I'm going to go and enjoy and get the dopamine from training, and then the gift shops on the way out, sort of thing, which could be really interesting. And who knows, that might be something those guys are considering. And the other thing, whenever I was sort of thinking about, where the brand, if I was sort of really ideating and blue skying, is where that brand could go outside of retail. If you look at sort of I sort of took some inspiration from what the guys at like Aston Martin and some of the luxury car brands are doing. They're creating kind of apartment blocks and places to live that are associated to the brand. So the Aston Martin team are doing the interior design of these very exclusive apartments in Miami and Dubai, and you can bring your Aston Martin up in the middle of the building and park it outside your apartment with a window to look at your car. There could be some interesting ways. You imagine if you said, right, what could we do in the future with that brand in terms of, again, really hitting the wants and needs of that very quite narrow group of consumers, in terms of effectively getting more of their wallet share. Yeah, it's really, really interesting.
That would really make gym life real life, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And it
is for those individuals, yeah.
So we talked a bit about, obviously, Gymshark wasn't the only highlight. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the Hut Group and the kinds of things?
Yeah, very different proposition. Yeah, I joined the Hut Group in 2009, so it's formative years. It was a business then that was effectively exclusively a white label e-commerce platform. So we were powering the entertainment online retail stores for the likes of Asda and other general merchandisers who were perhaps struggling and having some of their online market share taken from the likes of Play.com and Amazon. And actually Play was my previous employer. So my experience in Play was the thing that kind of gave me the opportunity at the Hut Group. And over the time I was there, my first couple of years there, I was, I suppose, actually what would be called growth now. I was responsible, because we called it e-commerce director, but it was responsible for demand creation. And then had obviously a stakeholding in sort of product to some degree, but much more then around owning content, performance marketing, trading, and conversion rate optimization. And then as we, I suppose, demonstrated that we could start to grow more profitably and faster through myself and a few other guys from Play joined. And again, we started to, that business was in that inflection point of hiring experienced people into its business. We're able to sort of upturn the demand generation. We're able then to talk to investors to say, well, we know we've got a formula for growth, put some money in, and we're going to use that to then acquire, I suppose, more friendly, perfect for e-commerce sort of brands or product categories, which, sports nutrition, which is high frequency, high gross margin, low return rate, easy to manage operationally effectively. Likewise, beauty, it's in the same place. So we kind of designed that what would be perfect if you had an e-commerce platform end-to-end, which the Hut Group owns. It's a full first-party platform end-to-end. Like, well, if we could put anything through this, it would be things that meet those criteria.
So that was the migration from CDs into very, very different categories.
Yes.
But still ticking those boxes of high frequency, low return, kind of would fit through a letterbox, obviously. A big tub.
And one hand pick was the kind of the thing we used to talk about. So not two hand picks.
Yeah. And just so earlier on we started out, we were talking a little bit about strategy. You mentioned some of the things you're looking at, where to play, how to win. which products to which channels to which audiences. So, that's kind of, let's say, the high level. From a tactical point of view, what are the things that you're looking at on a day-to-day basis or a quarter-to-quarter basis to help push that strategy forward?
I suppose the way that we look at that, so we think about it sequencing into tactics, actions, and control. So again, maybe to bring that to life in the minds of the listener, if you think about the strategy, and we'll talk about fitness a bit, haven't we? So imagine you think to yourself, oh, I'd like to feel a bit fitter, a bit thinner. That's the Hollywood version of myself in your head. So that's like the mission and the vision you have in your head. The objective might be, lose 10 kilograms by the 1st of June, ready for the summer. And then the strategy would be diet. When you deconstruct that, would be move more, eat better. And that's the rule, the immutable rule that never changes. That's that clarity of the rule. Tactically then, depending on the individual, and this is obviously in brackets, depending on the company, you might say, well, for me, I love running, I love swimming, but I'm going to join a gym as well. I'm going to get a personal trainer, stop eating beige food. And they're the tactics. And then when you come down another level into action as well, if you say, well, I'm going to join the gym, I've actually got to go, sign up, turn up, train. They're the actions. And I suppose then the control is the measurement, right? And the measurements are, am I on track? So I said, am I losing 1 kilogram a week consistently? No, I'm not. Actually, I stopped. I fell off the wagon and had a load of drinks with my mates during the middle of the week. I'm feeling a bit tired, whatever, right? So that's the thing that feeds back into, and a brilliant, I suppose, way of actually talking about tactically having to ensuring tactics, actions, and are changed by default. Think about when COVID came, if you're using this analogy, I can't go to the gym anymore. I can't meet my personal trainer. I'm not allowed to go to the swimming pool. What am I going to do? Right, the tactic now is to run up and down the stairs. It's to jump around in front of the TV with Joe Wicks. But my tactics changed based on a macro situation that changed. So that's kind of the framework of thinking like that. And then I suppose the way that we do that with our clients when we're talking to them about how to understand the different tactics across the business, and they vary massively, don't they? Because if you're in the product function, what are the tactics you're deploying are very different to the ones in the customer service team, right? Just worlds apart. So we will group the company into 10 functions. The first 5 I'm going to read out think of them as like vertical pillars in your head. So think about 5 vertical pillars and think of customers moving across these pillars from left to right. So you've got product, brand, marketing, trading, and operations. And operations is like that fulfillment and customer service. So customers move through that journey.
Yep.
And then what allows those pillars to stand up above the ground is then the foundations underneath, clue in our name, growth foundation.
Mm-hmm.
They are the horizontal kind of foundations that layer up to support those pillars. So you've got from the ground moving to the floor, there is insight, tech, finance, people, and executive. So we will then sort of, understand those things, and then you can clearly articulate where your people are and where you think about what's the purpose of these functions. So product we've already discussed, like making and sourcing awesome products that my target audience love. Brand is storytelling, getting people to fall in love with me. Operations, deliver the promise that we make to our customers. Finance, make sure we've got enough money to do the things we want to do, etc., etc. So that's kind of that high level, right? And how we think about things. And then I suppose tactically though, if I think about, you were talking about some of those things that we do, that kind of came back to some of the sort of the playbook thing. It would be if you understood, like, for example, in Gymshark, we're about conditioning and the journey of becoming the best version of yourself. And one of the things that we thought about as well is that we understood that's where we play and how we win is in that clarity of that conditioning. It would be tactically, we have an opportunity to sponsor a football team. They phoned us up and said, do you want to go on the shirts of a Premier League football team? You're like, no, we don't. We're not where the goals are scored. Could we tell stories about how that Premier League player went from grassroots into the team? That's where we'd like to work tactically with you. And then you can sort of see the sponsorship sales guy at the football team scratching his head going, no, we can't, I don't have a package to sell you there. I don't have a billboard.
Yeah.
And then that takes a bit more energy, which actually we have, because we're not considering, should we go and sell to a marketplace or not? We've got some energy now to go, well, look, why don't we work a bit harder on this and see if we could secure some storytelling with your players, for example. So that's kind of how we sort of, the hierarchy of that structure works.
You're not about where the goals are scored, you're about the journey.
Yeah, I'm sitting here grinning, listening to all of that, Rich, because anybody that's ever done any work with me will have heard me bang on relentlessly about the SOSTAC planning framework.
Yeah, you can see I've kind of squashed it around what we do, absolutely.
And then, but what I really love to hear is the clarity on your vertical and your horizontal pillars for delivering that at a tactical level. I think the first bit of the battle is having that clarity on what your strategy is, and then understanding, okay, we know where we're going, but what are those things that we're going to do under what headings to deliver against that strategy? And I think this is a really useful takeout for anybody that's listening, because it keeps manners on everything.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it keeps you real. And actually, again, this is about that return on energy. So I think about, that strategy often can be on a piece of paper in a document that you write down and say, right, where do we play? How do we win? What's our objective? What's our mission, vision? But actually, Gordon, I love the SOSTAT model, but we changed it to, actually, I suppose, bastardized it is the right way to talk about it. We put a V in it for vision and mission, because actually that doesn't exist in SOSTAT. You can have situation, objective. It doesn't talk about purpose enough.
Yeah.
And then also there's a brilliant model, and that where to play, how to win. That's not something I'm gutted to tell everyone. We haven't created that. That's something that P&G come up with in the 60s, which is, it's a phenomenal model in terms of the clarity it brings you. So we've kind of squashed all those frameworks together. But I think one of the things that you talk about, like, some of those things, I suppose, thinking tactically is, I'm trying to think about like the vertical and the horizontal. Some of the things that we will try and work into sort of the taxonomy and language of the brands and clients we work with is, think about if you are, let's say, the most senior leader in the marketing, and usually it's called the marketing team. I want you to talk about that as a function. It's one of the functions of the business. So you're the leader of the marketing function, and the purpose is traffic at best quality, highest volume traffic at the lowest cost is your purpose. And then think of your team as your peers left to right. So if you're a head of marketing, you've got a head of brand next to you, a head of trading. That's the team. When you look left and right across those pillars, that's your team. You need to work really closely together to align and collaborate and do all that wonky thinking that you do when you're coming up with the plans and tactics. So the idea of, all right, we know we're a conditioning brand, or we know we're a window blinds brand, what do, et cetera, right? And then what do we want to do then tactically? And you're working left to right collaboratively, and then you translate and narrate that information back into your function. And we talk a lot about, it's right at the beginning, I was at this monologue, I was talking about like having your strategy down on a piece of paper, which is all very well, but some of the best businesses that we see that have kind of got themselves up into the 10-20 million euro mark already, what they usually have is maybe a bit of luck that one of the founding team or one of the strategic kind of decision makers of the business is a great narrator. They're a brilliant storyteller. And what they do in every interaction, if you're a supplier, a partner, an employee at any level, from the very junior to the very senior, that individual is brilliant at keep reminding you and narrating you the plan. So it gets into the muscle memory of the business. And again, to think about that for the guys to bring it to life, or put your minds back to the Karate Kid movie from the 80s. Think of your brand and your business as Daniel at the beginning of the movie, the high potential, champion of the future. And then you can see where this is going. You can then think of the strategy actually as Mr. Miyagi, right? So, but Miyagi's the narrator. He's actually not the strategy himself. He's the narrator. He's the guide. He's the guiding light. And actually, what's interesting, there's a brilliant book that brought this to life for me called Story Brand. So check that out.
I'm another huge fan. That's another one of my books that I give out to people.
This is where it comes from, Gordon, right? So, but actually that whole thing of where he's training Daniel in the summer of wax on, wax off, wash the cars, paint the fence, scrub the deck. That's getting the strategy into the muscle memory of Daniel, effectively the brand. So that's what you've got to think about, is like, okay, I've written down the strategy. What are the techniques now I need to use in my business to get that strategy? So when someone is approached by an unusual question, internally or externally, hey, would you like to sell on Marketplace? Would you like to sponsor a sports team? It's instantly muscle memory, yes or no, because you've got that clarity of the strategy. Yeah.
Do you find with some of the people that you work with, if they haven't got that, they haven't got that strategic clarity, do you find that you would then end up working with organizations that are very tactically focused? And if you do, how do you get them to take a step back from being down in the trenches and think about strategic direction.
We have a framework, which again I can share, so maybe you guys can take a look at the template. Happy to share this for you and your listeners. Actually, we put strategic clarity and rigor on a y-axis. I think of a quadrant, 4 squares. You've got the y, so the y vertical axis is strategy, clarity, and then we put tactical capability on the x. So if you think about then what's the scale of that, because it's difficult to give it a number. So we actually put needs work right at the bottom to leading edge at the very top, and you go through as expected and above average, and we actually will score that based on relatively subjective and peer group knowledge. So when we meet a, let's say, 4 million turnover brand with a team of 3, etc., the scoring is appropriate comparing it to, let's say, the Hut Group now, who are 2 billion turnover with 10,000 employees. It's not appropriate to score them on each other. But either way, you can now imagine when we look at a business and we deconstruct strategy, which we have done, which is where to play, how to win, and we deconstruct how to win into actually the narrative clarity is one of those. So how good are you at narrating this strategy into the organization? So we score all of those things. That allows me to plot you, let's say, on above average for strategy. And then typically the brands we meet are usually this way round. They have a slightly above average or strategy, and tactical capability along the other axis is usually around the needs work or as expected. And you might find, like I found at Gymshark when I met them, they were leading edge on influencer marketing and earned marketing. It was still quite an immature space, so they weren't particularly sophisticated, but compared to their peers, no one was doing it as well as they were. And then you looked across all the other things you can deconstruct in tactical capability. So how good is your organic media? How good is your paid media? And then you deconstruct that again into paid search, paid social, display, above the line. You can imagine how that all sort of works through CRM, conversion rate optimization, visual merchandising, category management of product, etc. That they under index. That was all that needs work. Tech stack needs work, insight needs work. And then that kind of gives you a sense of, right, the focus actually is we need to do a bit of work on strategy to bring some more narrative clarity here. But actually the focus for the next year is all about upgrading the tactical execution. And then what that does when you balance them, it moves you into the top right-hand quadrant, which is growing the right way, which is what we call that kind of...
That's almost an ideal starting position.
Yeah.
Real clarity on what you want to do, where do you want to go, who are you for, and then you make the decisions tactically on...
Yeah, and you think about the impact of some of those decisions. So if you did think, right, I do want to open, it's right for my brand, and we've got an everyone brand, it's a mass market proposition, it's quite convenient, low value, it's really appropriate for us to be, let's say, in grocery or physical retail and marketplace. Once that's established, you come then down to tactical capability. You're like, well, who have I got here? Don't have anyone to manage this. I don't have the right technology. Do I have actually enough cash in the bank to now have a negative working cash channel? Although it could be amazing for my marketing because I'm now on the shelf in 1,000 pharmacies or whatever, right? So that then it sets those out. If you go around the other way and think, right, I'm going to build my tactical plan and my org first before setting the proposition and the strategy, you'll end up again probably low return on energy and yield.
That's so. I think it's what we've been speaking about. Gordon and I work so frequently in all of these areas. It's so interesting, how the frameworks, they kind of cross-pollinate each other. And sometimes I think the experience that you bring to the whole thing is even just understanding which pieces of the model, all of the models that are out there, which pieces you're actually going to bring to the table.
Yeah, which one the most useful within the context.
Exactly. One of my favorite quotes is, all models are broken, but some are useful. It's that knowing which ones are the ones that actually...
Well, and actually, I suppose turning it sort of our model on the head slightly as well is that you could come this with a very kind of, I suppose, exclusively model-led consultancy. Here are some great models, and you sort of talk about that. I suppose the benefit of what we have in the majority of my team, I've got 25 people at Growth Foundation, only 2 are actually exclusively agency background, and they're in my creative team, which absolutely is fine because actually they're not wedded to the pressure of worrying about money and P&L, right? They're just brilliant creative thinkers. Everyone else who has any responsibility near a number has come from a business, like a direct-to-consumer e-commerce business. So they can, again, look at the model, understand actually that part of that model is brilliant, or actually that KPI that we used in my previous life over here is perfect for this. Or so we're very, we've been there and had, like I'm sure all your listeners will have, is that the highs and lows, the dopamine and the serotonin of like the Shopify bell ringing and then not. like it's Saturday morning, you look at the number and go, oh man, it's going to be a tough week. It's going to be a tough week. You know, we've all been there. And actually, yeah, so we know. So there's, I think, a lot of things we talk about our values here is that, unlike other perhaps more, I suppose, established consultancies like the McKinseys or the Bains or the Big Fours who can do quite a lot of work on strategy, we've got the pattern recognition and we've been there, and the empathy to understand what it feels like to be a first-time founder or, you know, employee number 3 in a small business or a scale-up business. We've all been there.
It's a unique thing to bring to the table, the kind of pragmatic and practical background and experience. Not alone the thinking around strategy and understanding where and why those things are important, but also how to bring that back to the tactical piece. Because at the end of the day, you know, you're anybody who's going to be speaking to you will also want to know, well, that's great. Now, what am I doing tomorrow morning? Like, I'm coming into work on Monday. Where am I going? And that comes back to the tactical pieces that you were talking about earlier on. A question to wrap up, because we could speak with you all day, obviously. But a question just to wrap up that we've been asking people recently is what do you feel is the opportunity now in e-commerce for the next 12 months? I know that you've been working with this great little tool, Order Rescue. I spotted it on LinkedIn. I really like the look of it. And let's talk about that briefly, but is that also the biggest opportunity?
Actually, yeah, so I suppose opportunity sounds like, when you sort of, I suppose maybe the dictionary definition might go something around finding new maybe tactics or areas for growth. And I think there will always be, so again, if you're out there listening as strategic decision makers or owners of businesses, you've always got permission to question the decisions you've made. Have I chosen the right audiences? Have I chosen the right products? But my guidance there would be, don't do that in an open environment where your tactical people are. You'll confuse them and you'll lose energy. Think of that ethical pirate captain on a ship. He's in his office, you know, in the captain's thing at the back of the ship on his own, thinking about that. He won't be musing that with the crew because just confuse them. They're like, no, I've already told you we're going over here. This is why we're going. There's a big pot of treasure. And maybe he's back in the office thinking there might be a bigger pot of treasure over in that other island. But I'll keep musing that on my own before telling the crew to get distracted. That's one thing. I think if you're more tactical opportunity, goodness me, I think one of the things we see a lot with every business is the ease of getting distracted with new things all the time. I think just making sure the brilliant basics are in place in everything you do and every function. And that will be really different. But I suppose let's talk about conversion rate optimization. So are you in stock most of the time of the things that people come to you for, that you're famous for? You know, the grocery store, bread and milk. Or if you're at the home improvement store, it's the white paint and white spirit. Is that in stock all the time, every day? It's really boring, but it's the bread and butter of the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get that sorted before getting distracted with the champagnes and chocolates at the front. I would say...
it just feels like this year, 2023, it feels like a year of consolidation. I had a bit of poetry recently where I was talking about the North Star and the mists dissipating and all of that. It's still there. It's still in the same place.
I think the opportunity is as well, particularly for pure play e-commerce stores. And this is a message. I've got the luck of, I suppose, my age and when being born when I actually worked in physical retail for the first sort of 9 years of my retail career. And one of the things I've tried to do whenever I can, if we have the opportunity, is take pure play e-commerce clients and teams I've had into physical retail environments. The disciplines that you need there are obviously very different. It's a bit like, you know, you both want to win the race, which is growing your brand and, you know, your revenue through the till. But like physical retail's Formula One driving and e-com is rally driving. A lot of the terminology is the same, but the way of winning the race is very different.
Yeah.
Spend some time, try if you can to go and work in a shop, literally spend some time or visit more physical retail environments and take on, why have they put that there in the window? Why have they dressed the end of the aisle there? How are they flowing people through this store? There's a reason that the grocery stores put bread and milk in the back of the store, is because you have to walk past the champagne and chocolates and all the other stuff and you end up with a 8 times bigger basket than you would have done anyway. And I don't think there's enough content, and, you know, I don't know what you guys think, around thinking like physical retailers and applying those techniques and methodologies in an e-com environment.
You're preaching to the converted, my man.
We talk about this all the time.
It absolutely has to happen. And actually, that's quite a nice segue to Order Rescue, because one of the things we get asked a lot is that should I be using voucher codes and promo codes? am I using too many? Should I turn them off? And obviously, we'd like, again, one of our methodologies, we want insight-led decisions, or to make insight-led, we want to have insight-led and informed decisions, right, when we're making things. So we're like, well, actually, let's have a look at, and I don't know how you guys feel when you're in this sort of space, but there's not brilliant reporting and visibility of actually what's going on with voucher codes at all. You can see how many were used, you can see what you've got live in your e-commerce CMS, but actually you don't get any visibility of the interaction of the voucher code box in any e-commerce tool as far as I'm aware. And so we thought, well, it'd be interesting to build some tracking to see actually what's going on with that very small, micro step of the journey to the checkout, but it's a very sensitive one. We've got people in high intent to buy, they're feeling anxious, all the thing around, is it the right time, anxiety
Absolutely.
around, I suppose,
if I hang around for
and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And particularly if you're in a product category which is quite impulsive, where you see a brilliant piece of content in TikTok or social media, you think, I want that, and you come in and something goes wrong, you're very quick to leave and bounce out of the journey. So we're like, let's have a look at that. And it really surprised us what happened. So we tracked about 2 million checkouts across a number of merchants. And on average, 8% of everyone who enters the checkout will attempt an invalid voucher code and then not convert because it wasn't valid. You get that invalid code, try again. And what's interesting, if you deconstruct the thought process of that user, is that the value, they think they've come with a valid deal. So there's either that they've been given it from an influencer, they've found something and they think that that's it. And that group, that the loss of that offer is greater than the benefit of the product that they're about to buy. So they don't convert, which is really interesting kind of, psychology there of the consumer. Yeah. So we're thinking, again, bringing this back to a physical retail store. Imagine you've got a coupon from the paper that says 10% off baked beans today, and you've kind of put it in the bottom of your handbag. You've walked into the store, got your beans in the thing, go up to the checkout, and the code doesn't scan because it's kind of been screwed up in your bag. What would happen in a physical retail store? I guess most often than not, you'd have the checkout associate would say, "Don't worry, I've got a copy here on the till," beep, and you'd be on your way, very happy. Yeah. And that doesn't happen in e-com. You get invalid code, try again.
Yeah. The amount of disappointment, like you say, it entirely outweighs the value that the customer thinks they're going to get from the product.
This is a consumer. Actually, this is a human psychology thing from I think it's the fast and slow thinking guys, and I can't recall their names. Those wicked Nobel Prize winning psychologists, which was the fear of loss is greater in humans than the gain of the on the other side. Yeah, it hurts to lose things more than it does to get to win.
This ties in with something I saw this week. I was reading it on LinkedIn, and it was from an SEO agency. And one of the most common search terms for any brand is brand plus voucher code or brand plus promo code. And I'm sure that's going to be one of the behaviors that's being surfaced here as you get to the promo box, and then it's like, right, okay, I'm going to type in whatever it is I'm shopping for plus promo code, and then you're at an inflection point. Yep. Their suggestion to fix that was put all your promo codes on your website, which I thought was quite an interestingly risky approach. And,
no, my advice would be install Order Rescue. So what it does is effectively it acts like a checkout associate. So if you've got one of the, I call them the chancer, and there's a lot of those, right? So of that 8% who invalid and leave, we believe it's merchant dependent and how well they've managed their codes previously, but roughly half are trying it on. They try staff 1, 2, 3, test 1, 2, 3, all that good stuff. And then the other guys are genuinely have got a genuine code, welcome 10, and their fat thumb on a mobile phone keyboard has typoed it wrong, and then they leave. So we built a tool that allows you to configure based on what's typed in. If they're a new customer returning, what's in the basket, you name it, a rescue offer, which can be percentage off, gift with purchase, a fixed money off, and it acts like a human would do at a till. So, for example, new customer comes in with a very slow-moving, high-margin item in their basket, which costs 500 quid, and says, "Mate, could you do us a deal on this?" You might go, "Yeah, I will do you a deal on that. I need to move that stock on." If a returning customer comes in and says, "I'd like to buy something you sell loads of, not great margin," you'd be like, "No, sorry, move on." And obviously, if they come with the valid code and it just doesn't work, then make it work. That's what the tool does.
Brilliant. Rich, thanks for summing all that up, and thank you for joining us this morning. We're out of time. I wish we had another hour to chat to you some more, but It's been an education, it's an education for us. I hope it's an education for the listeners. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, likewise. And I mentioned and promised some of those resources. So, guys, I'll PDF up those things over to you. And likewise, if anyone wants to reach out, I'm on, we're at the Growth.Foundation. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. So happy to share more and help your listeners wherever we can.
Great. Thanks
Fantastic.
so much, Rich. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Thanks,
Great
Rich.
stuff. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Wasn't Rich great today? I learned tons. And I think the biggest takeaway for me, apart from nautical analogies, which we'll cover later, was that strategic clarity of where to play and how to play and who you are actually targeting. And having that clarity and being able to tell that story to the teams that you have within your organization and for everybody to align behind it is such a fantastic tool. And then, of course, you've got this breadth of tactical tools that you can use to deliver against strategy.
I think it's important because there's a lot of talk about strategy. And the one thing I always remember when I listened to people talk about strategy was I increasingly had no idea what they were really talking about, and or what it meant. Like, we're going to put it down on paper. What are we going to put down on paper? A sentence, like an entire, like a one pager, and you'd see some businesses with 100 pages worth of strategy. The thing that I really liked about this, and I suppose actually just to go back a tiny bit, I came across a quote a while back around strategy, and the quote is that strategy is the focus of multiple resources on a single purpose. So it's that idea of we have a single purpose. It's clearly stated. We all know what it is. And we have multiple resources. There's lots and lots of people. There's marketing people. There's the trading people. There's the product and production people. But all of these people are all focused towards this one single purpose. And he talked about that quite well. So he talked about, as you said, the where to play and how to win. But then he talked also about how across the roles and across the positions in the business, everybody would look and try look from shoulder to shoulder, and from the e-commerce manager to the trading manager to understand how they would work together to push towards a single vision. And there's that element of the single vision, but within that, there's the recognition of the practical reality that we are going to have to implement this as a tactic. We have to execute on this. It's not enough just to say, here's a sentence, this is our strategy. What are we doing now? And then he talked about the tactic, the action, and the measurement of that.
Yeah, the control, which I got very excited over the idea of tactics, actions, and controls. But that's the bit about getting things done and pushing in the same direction. I also really love the idea that, you might get distracted and there might be another pot of gold somewhere else, but that involves a strategic change.
Yeah.
Don't bring that resist the temptation to bring that into the broader team, because that's going to be really confusing.
Yeah.
And what strategy does is it gives the teams the tools to know where they're going. And I think that clarity was so evident in some of the examples that he gave around Gymshark.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed that.
There was actually something that I was speaking with him about as well, is the whole idea of an offer architecture. It was something that I hadn't come across before. Like, obviously, I've heard you talk loads about pricing architecture and that area, but he spoke about offer architecture, and we didn't get into it in the podcast, but the offer architecture, four principal points: the uniqueness, so something unique about the product that you're offering; the brand, how is it? How does the product support the brand and what you're trying to do and what the story is that you're trying to tell? The social proof, so the elements of who else is using this and how are they benefiting from it, and the actual offer itself, the price point, scarcity, and things like that. So it's this kind of like an idea of an offer architecture, which I thought was really, really clever. And it's very impressive how he has these, from the tips of his fingers, these whole kind of like, he has all of the models, but is also still able to kind of bring this back to a practical example and talk about, certain things like, let's say, Audi, he talks about a little bit about the emblematic emblematic design. So the idea of the Audi, the lights on the back of an Audi now, where when they turn on the indicators and the LED lights kind of
they do their flashy thing.
Yeah, so you can tell, and you know that's an Audi from miles away. They're in front of you. You know that's an Audi in the distance. So it's really I learned a lot in that area. I think the offer architecture, that just really practical let's say experience, that lived experience that he's able to bring to this area, and how that feeds into the tactics, and how that then feeds into the push, the driving on of the strategy. I thought that was fabulous.
So you've got that offer architecture there, or proposition architecture, if you like. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I really, really enjoyed was he has practitioners on his team. So they have felt that empathy that all of us have felt at one stage. It's one thing when the Shopify bell dings. It's the other thing when it doesn't.
Yeah, he had a story there.
And
we didn't get a chat. I mean, but I could see him. You know, he obviously was remembering something in his past.
We've all been there, where we think we've done absolutely everything right, and we are expecting something to fly, and it falls flat, and you need to go back and actually ask those questions of, was it really aligned to our strategy correctly? Is it the right customer? Was it promoted in the right way? Did we actually have availability? I think anybody who's listening has probably been in that awful position where you run a big promotional piece of activity, and then bam, all the inventory's gone
within seconds,
and you're just sitting there with traffic.
You're sitting there with complaints and customer service and social media saying, well, he never had it anyway. They're just tempting us in here with their lies.
But we could probably do a whole show on the various horror stories that we have experienced over the years. We probably won't.
Well, would people listen to us? What about I love the pirate captain, the Maverick, the guy in the back of the ship with the parrot on his shoulder.
Nautical analogies are definitely off it. I think there's two things that have come out of this season of the podcast. One is brilliant nautical analogies, of which, like, more boats. And I do like the idea now of a patch and a pirate, a pirate with a patch and a parrot. And then
jolly good.
The other theme that has come is brilliant basics.
Absolutely.
Everybody that we have spoken to has talked about brilliant basics and doing this really, really well. And this is the key to unlocking creativity, because if your basics are brilliant, then you can do all of the other cool stuff with your parrot.
You know, in reality, it's a hygiene factor. You know, it's nearly table stakes nowadays. You have to be able to come to the table. You want to play the game. You have to be able to do the basics brilliantly. So you need to focus on that. Remember to come back to it again and again, because otherwise, if you don't have that level, you don't have that platform to, let's say, to start off of or to scale off of. How are you going to implement something beyond that?
It's like the opportunity cost of it, though, isn't it? That where are you spending your time? You've a finite amount of time during the week. And if you're spending all of that time putting out fires, fixing problems, you're not spending that time on things that add a bit more value. And to be quite frank, are a lot more fun.
Yeah.
The basics should be easier, but they're really, really difficult.
They are really difficult. And on that note, yo ho ho, me hearty. Thanks very much, Gordon. And thanks to everybody for listening. Delighted to have you once again on this episode of Functional and Fabulous.
Thanks, Jeff. Bye.
You've been listening to Functional and Fabulous with Jerk Johan and Gordon Newman. If you'd like to know more about the podcast or about Studio 49 and Omnichannel Stories, please go to functionalandfabulous.ie. Our sound engineer was Elaine Smith, and the show was produced by Roger Overall.